Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshops, where you can have a couple of hours of sitting back and relaxing and learn some technology. As I realized you didn't hear anything from me before because my mic was up, your microphones are muted until at the end. If you have questions, send them to Judy. Drop down the chat box and you will see her name there. If you have questions for the panelists, if they're specifically for George, send them with a G in front, Andrea with an A, and for Larry with an L. Today, we're having two different presentations today, kind of related. Our first presentation's on robots for seniors, and we got a team here. George Bowden, the Vice President and Webmaster of the Victoria Computer Club, and Dr. Andrea Slane, who's the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Programs for Legal Studies at Ontario Tech University. They are going to be kind of sharing a presentation from intelligent audio to humanoid robots. So we're going to let them take over and get started.
You see that okay?
Yes.
So my name is George Bowden, and I suppose this is the right way to present. We don't speak on camera first, right?
Up to you.
Okay. We got involved with this interest when Andrea brought a project that was funded by the government to the West Coast for input from a senior center and seniors in that center. And so I wanted to make sure there was good representation from technically aware people. And so I went to that meeting and got kind of interested in this topic, and then developed a little presentation of my own based on what she had said. Andrea, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm a professor in the legal studies program at Ontario Tech University, and as George was saying, I met George, it's now close to, I guess, a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, where I had a grant from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada to do a study of how seniors felt about a whole host of technologies that were being marketed to seniors to help support them to live independently for longer, to sort of age in their own homes, especially robots that had a humanoid form. So I did focus groups across Canada. It's a Canadian study, including in BC, and that's how I got to know George, and his group was actually the most technologically oriented of the seniors groups that I talked to. There was a full range of people, some people who had pretty much no interest in being particularly cutting edge about technology, and others who were quite involved with it. So it was a broad-ranging study, and since then I've gotten other grants, and I continue to look at this topic because it really is a booming field of development, trying to address this market in this way. So we're just going to hit on some of the issues that are raised by those kinds of products, and kind of relate them to some that you might be more familiar with, and pointing towards where this is going. My own expertise is mainly in things like privacy and how we can protect the interests of consumers and other more vulnerable populations when they use these products, and how we might go about doing that. So that will be a particular focus. So George has the control of the slides. George,
you want to introduce next slide?
Yeah, we can see it. Can you wanted to introduce the specific topics we'll be talking
about? Sure. So you're probably aware of Google Mini and Alexa and things like that are voice-activated assistants. For seniors, robotic pets have become a marketable device, we get then to more humanoid devices like LEQ, and eventually to the AI-driven social devices for seniors. There's a lot of AI involved in all this, but we'll focus on the ethical issues and the privacy issues of these devices. Maybe you can go into this study a little bit, or have you enough?
I'll tell you just a little bit more about it. So, so there is a link in the slide that I can also provide, make sure that everybody has available to them, to the report that we wrote and some guidelines that we wrote for developers based on the study. You know, ultimately we did put together a bunch of different kind of audiences. Like some of it is addressed to seniors who participated, some of it is more addressed to developers, the kinds of things that they need to think of. But I will be talking about that throughout this later on in the presentation, about the things that we uncovered talking to seniors about how they felt about some of these products. It was trying to bridge technologies that people are currently using with technologies that are proposed or sort of coming to market. The thing about robots is that they are still very much of a emerging technology. It's not like the humanoid ones are you know, common in anybody's household at this point, but they are coming. And so the kind of links between the voice assistants that many of you already have and the ones that are being developed with these sort of additional kind of capabilities is one of the main things that we were trying to get at in this study. And as George already mentioned, George was a participant in one of the focus groups, so he knows the kinds of questions that we asked.
And yeah, it was an interesting talk that she gave, and I came to it pretty reluctantly. I mean, I was concerned not so much about the privacy, but just about the issues of identifying with humanoid robots. And that's what has been the most interesting part to me, is the sort of psychological interaction of people with these robots. Everything from voice assistants, which I think have become increasingly a part of people's lives. I started off with one of these Google Minis, and then I had to make sure then I got a Google Home because the sound was a little better. It's excellent for setting appointments, reminders, alarms, and providing for answers. And it's not made to look humanoid, so I don't have a problem personally with this kind of device. Although there's still a large connection between us, between our personal things. For instance, I'll play something here, and you can judge yourself. So I'm going to ask it if it's my friend. Are you my friend?
Of course. Friends don't let friends search alone.
So that's one of the answers. Whenever I ask a question of it, it kind of comes up with a different answer. And Andrea pointed out that it's not really committing to a friendship here, although it does say of course. And it does more in terms of making a bit of a joke of this. But how much trust will people start to put in these devices, even something that doesn't look humanoid? So they react to questions, simple, and they have a wake-up word, and there's privacy concerns, which Andrea will address. I've been a little concerned about, what somebody outside my apartment could say, but Bill James pointed out that if it's to open a door, for instance, you can put a password on it. So I've gone too far here.
Yeah, go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this study, we did ask people. There were less people, I'm sure, than there is now. Who had these devices in their homes. But it was one of the things that was clear was that people. Some people were very reluctant to have a device like this because of the security concerns that they had. Some of them didn't trust the companies. A lot of these devices, as you can tell, are the big tech companies. Some of them are the social media companies. Facebook has a device like this that we'll talk about in just a minute, for instance. Google, of course, and then Amazon. Very big companies that, depending on how much you trust the company, might influence how much you trust the information that the device is collecting and how it's using that. So that was something that was already 2 years ago when we did the focus groups, was a concern to many of the seniors in the group, depending again on how much they trusted those companies to begin with. One of the things that we found back then was that there were quite a few seniors who were unwilling to do online shopping. That might have changed now also with the pandemic and needing to do more of that than you maybe would have preferred to do before. That's something that I'm interested in following up on, but that might influence, what you would be willing to do with this device as well. But I was interested in starting with these devices because of that voice capability, which is a humanoid feature. It's not a humanoid form, but having a human voice or human sounding voice that reacts to you is still a humanoid feature. So it goes in that kind of direction. People were also concerned about people from the outside being able to hack these devices and get some sort of access to what's going on inside your home. So security was still a big concern a couple of years ago, and probably still is as well. People had anecdotes about the devices being activated when they weren't supposed to, like when you didn't actually intend them to. And so, responding to some conversation that's going on between people in the home. So that was concerning to some, that it wasn't foolproof, that it wasn't always listening when you weren't asking it to. So these are the kinds of things that people raised, and that the companies are trying to address in various ways, but it's still something that's kind of under development. And again, I think one of the big issues is how much people trust the companies themselves and how they're going to be using any information that they collect about your conversations with
Do you
it.
think the companies have turned the corner on people's concerns about the security? Have they come across with more information and clearer security? Because I know with the Europeans' focus on privacy, they've had to put in more information. Some of it's good, some of it's not. I don't like having to accept cookies on every website that I go to. But do you think that they are bringing forward enough privacy settings?
Well, can you go to the next slide? So I think there's a couple of different answers to that, because I think on the one hand, they're needing to address privacy concerns and data use concerns that people have, but on the other hand, I think they're constantly increasing the capabilities of these devices. So now, as many of you I'm sure know, and probably many of you even have these devices, especially again because of the pandemic, many voice assistants now also have cameras and are capable of doing video calling of various sorts. So they've combined a video calling feature that people might have been, again, 2 years ago when we did this study, video calling was one of the more common support technologies that they were using already, like many of the seniors in the focus groups, but usually through Skype or either through their desktops or their laptops. And now there's a lot more integration of those features into voice assistants as well, and sort of being able to activate them again by voice, sort of say, can you call whoever, and the device will set up the call for you. So that helps, that integrates some of these new features with other kinds of online interaction. So calling is one thing, but it also, some of them integrate with social media accounts. So, it will give you alerts, for instance, if, one of your friends on Facebook, is available or online, and, maybe now's a good time to call them, different sorts of things like that. So there's more information that it is kind of proactively providing for you. There's certainly things I'm sure that you can sort of do in your settings to sort of turn things on and off. I know that the Facebook device in particular is trying to promote itself as being privacy by design, so there's switches that are fairly easy to locate and operate. You can put the camera off, or there's even a cover you can put on some of the camera things, and sort of make sure that these are fairly intuitive. But at the same time, the companies are still collecting quite a lot of information in the way that they always do when you're interacting online, and these devices still do that as well. So I think that's one of the things that I wanted to show. There's a promo video of
I'm going to have to stop sharing, and then I'll come back because I forgot to set the video there. Share the sound.
The other thing I wanted to say, it's also on the slide, is that they do integrate with some other devices that these companies provide, for instance, smart doorbells and things like that. And you'll see
Meet Portal from Facebook. Portal, Portal Mini, Portal Plus, and Portal TV.
Hey, Portal, call Marcus.
Hey, Mom, how you doing?
Good to see you. Hey, Brent.
Portal's smart camera pans and zooms to keep up with the action. And as more people join in, it widens to keep everyone in view.
Hello, my dear. How are you?
And smart sound minimizes background noise,
Hey, Nadia. How are you? So adorable. I love
bringing
it.
your voice front and center.
Oh, I don't know what I was thinking. Hey, Portal, call Katie.
Portal also lets you video call friends and family with Messenger or WhatsApp.
Your favorite pie.
And you can easily connect with friends and family on a group call, even if they don't have Portal. With Storytime, you can become some of your favorite storybook characters with music, animation, and AR effects. Enjoy Facebook Watch with friends as if you're all in the same room together. Or jam to your favorite music with rich sound and deep bass. Portal is an amazing picture frame that can display your favorite Facebook and Instagram photos. And with Portal's adaptive display, your pictures will look great in any light. Portal can also show birthday reminders and let you know when your favorite people are available to connect.
Alexa, show the front door.
Portal has Alexa built in, so you can control your smart home.
He's got a boyfriend.
And Portal is private by design. All video calls are encrypted, and you can easily disable the microphone and camera, or block the lens with the camera cover. With Portal, now you have a whole new way to feel connected, whether it's a Portal, Portal Mini, Portal Plus, or Portal TV. Portal. If you can't be there, feel there.
So are we back?
I think so, yeah. So except you're not in presentation view. I think we're seeing a lot of extra stuff on your.
Okay, let's get there. That better?
Yeah. So that shows you a lot of this sort of, and Facebook Portal is just one device that's doing that. There are others too that are trying to integrate a lot of these different smart technologies into a kind of voice assistant based kind of hub. And we'll see, there was a lot of concern before the pandemic about what that meant, like, as you saw with that little promo video, the Instagram and the Facebook and the sort of different kinds of messenger apps and things like that, Alexa, all these things integrating into one place. There was concern about the fact that, these are still companies that collect data and deliver profiles based on your activity on these various sorts of platforms. And so there was concern about that. However, with the pandemic, it seems that there's been a lot more uptake of these types of devices that have these video calling and sort of additional kinds of connection features. And so as you see from this one news article here, it says that, Facebook Portal, finally sort of overcame some of that reluctance as a result of the pandemic and people buying these types of devices, especially for their older family members. So this is where the senior part starts to come back in, the sort of understanding that this is a good way to sort of keep connected with seniors, who are maybe not, in the pandemic, of course, we weren't allowed to be in the same space together, but even without that, there's a lot of people who don't live close enough to have that kind of regular contact without this sort of technology. So I think that's interesting. And this particular type of device, the tech companies are also really good at selling it as an idea. So as you can see from this little article, there were thousands and thousands of them that were actually given to seniors in order to throughout the pandemic in order to sort of combat social isolation. So the Department of Veterans Affairs and the American Red Cross, sort of teamed up with Facebook in order to provide these sorts of devices to seniors. So that's the type of thing you sort of see with the kind of rollout that these companies are trying to do to get them into more people's homes.
You can choose your provider. I mean, Facebook is one, and if you don't trust Facebook, then you can look at the Google version of this or the Apple version of this. They've all got these tablet devices that have cameras that will follow you around a room. Some of them have cameras which actually will rotate 360 degrees, so you could use it as a security camera. So you got to consider when you're picking your device what the privacy issues and the policies behind it are. That would affect my choice of what the device I use.
Yeah, for sure. And on the slide here, that I've put trade-offs in the privacy paradox because the privacy paradox is basically the term that scholars pretty much use to describe how, and this is just online in general, not with these particular devices only, that people will say that they're concerned about their privacy, but they really want to use the technology, so they're willing to give it up. It's not a fair choice in a lot of ways because you don't often have a choice whether or not to give up some of your data in order to, especially for the advertising-based type business designs, that you basically have to, if you want to participate in that technology, you pretty much have to agree to it. So it's a kind of thing where the paradox is that people say they're concerned about privacy, but then they end up giving it away. However, in those focus groups, we found that there were still a pretty substantial subgroup of seniors who were not willing to give away their privacy, and they would just rather not use the technologies at all. So that kind of calculus, I think, that people go through in sort of thinking about, am I willing to use this technology or not, is probably shifting because of the comfort level that people had to get used to as a result of the pandemic. You can go on to the next slide. So I won't go too deeply into this. I'm, as I mentioned, I'm in legal studies, so I study, the different sort of legal regimes that we have to protect data. And I know that this group is in both Canada and the US. So there are different mechanisms in both countries where consumers are meant to be protected against misuse of their data. Canada's is more like the European Union than the US, which is more a consumer protection kind of model. There are pros and cons to both approaches. There's definitely gaps, and one of the big problems with both really is that it is fundamentally a kind of consent-based system. So like I was just explaining with the privacy paradox, it's basically, if you decide to use this technology, then you consent to having your data used in a particular kind of way that device uses it. And then once you've consented, it's pretty much, fair game. So whether or not that's fair is a kind of big question. And so the European Union definitely is at the cutting edge of finding ways to implement greater obligations on companies to protect people's data from being used in ways that they wouldn't want. So, I think they are succeeding over time in sort of pushing us all in that kind of direction. There's also a lot of new things going on in the area of artificial intelligence because, certainly the voice-operated part of these devices is artificial intelligence driven, right? Like it has natural language capabilities, it's learning how to speak. That capability is improving by the day, that the conversations are getting more sophisticated that these machines can have. And so there's increasingly some efforts to think about, what kind of legal protections or regulatory protections do we need as we get into this, ever increasing capability of these devices to have conversations and to make decisions for us. Other areas that you might be interested in, of course, are things like self-driving cars, which also will have voice-operated kinds of artificial intelligence built in. So there's a lot of things to think about in that area, and that's a very brand new kind of domain in the legal realm. So we can move on a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if I was muted when I said you have your choices on what companies to use to do this too. So although there's regulation, I think there is some difference between the way different companies treat your data.
Okay, so now we're ready to move into the ones that are actually embodied more. So not just a voice that reminds us of a human. And robotics is a really interesting area. There are some that are industrial robots that do jobs and they don't look like people at all, and they're very useful. And then there's this whole other area that is about humanoid robots and the degree to which we accept them as some form of companion. And people who are developing these robots, a lot of them are just in the research phase. They're not actually commercial products. Some of them are, but they're very expensive. Some of them are more consumer oriented. So we'll talk about a couple of different ones. This is a picture of Sophia, which is one of the internationally most well-known, highly humanoid kind of robot. She's not really a product that is around, right? Like she's very, very expensive, and she's more like a prototype of what can we possibly do in this domain. But robots like Sophia and even other ones that are not quite as humanoid as this do raise some ethical issues, and roboticists talk about them quite a lot, including the problem of deception. If we get to the point where natural language is good enough that you might not know that you're talking to a machine, that's a question. Like whether most ethicists would say it's important for people to realize that they're talking to an AI and not an actual human. So some sort of signaling has to happen. That's becoming more of an issue already with things like chatbots and those kind of automated systems that you might converse with when you're trying to get customer service from a company or something like that. The other concern, then this was something that was raised by the seniors in our focus groups as well, is substitution. Whether or not these types of devices, especially as they approach more sophisticated conversational capabilities, are they going to substitute for human companionship? That's a kind of concern that ethicists also try to stress that that's not what they're after, but we can talk about that more in the coming slides as well, especially around caregiving. And then there's also some concerns, and this again, maybe this came up in the focus group you were in, George, in BC as well, concerns about over technologization in general. You know, like, do we have too many devices and machines in our lives as it is? And some people would say yes, and some people would say no, of course. And this is a very tech-oriented kind of group, so you're probably more on the no, things are fine side than some of the participants that we had in the focus groups who were already feeling like they had that there was too much of that, especially in, you know, looking at their grandchildren and such, and sort of saying they spend too much time with their devices. So you're next, George.
Yeah, so I've stopped sharing because I wanted to show you this demonstration. One thing you notice is that people are programmed to adopt inanimate objects as things that they animate. We have puppets and ventriloquists I've been able to use this ability of humans, but it goes beyond that as people become more sharing with a device. So I thought I would show this. I don't know if I'm showing you as full screen, Andrea. Don't know how I switched to me being full screen.
I see you as full screen, so it's kind of.
Oh, that's okay. That's just different. Okay. So this is just a styrofoam wig holder, right? I'll hold it back here. You can see it better. And you know, in this form, you don't really start to mentally make a picture of this being anything other than that. But if I put some eyes on it, it becomes a little more, I think you can see that, it becomes a little more humanoid, right? Now, that's because eyes are important for humans. When they relate to people's faces, they need the eyes to do that, right? And then you can add some things like a hat, you know, and even when we did this in the computer club, we had it mounted so that when I talked, it would turn to me. It would turn to me and listen to what I was saying. And when somebody else in the room talked, we would rotate it without my obviously doing it. It was done with the cord to point to the next person who was talking. And that really freaked some people out because they didn't understand that I was doing that with a little bit of cord. But it makes it all of a sudden quite animated. And ventriloquists have used this for years. I mean, they always point the puppet to themselves when they're talking, and then when the puppet talks, they point it back to the audience like that. And so you get very easily fooled, or I don't know, fooled is the word, but very easily in the frame of mind where you're actually talking to a person, and this becomes a person, and people are programmed, you know, genetically to relate to these devices. Although you may consciously say, okay, this is just an inanimate object, the barrier between that feeling and the feeling that you're talking to a friend when you talk to Google or things like that is a very narrow, very weak barrier. And the problem is when people start to become when these inanimate objects start to become friends, then you start to reveal things that you wouldn't reveal in other cases. Okay, that's it for that. We go back to slides, right?
Yeah. So one of the concepts that roboticists are concerned about is what they call the uncanny valley. And the uncanny valley is that there is, and this is culturally specific, you know, different cultures have different tolerance level of humanoid devices that are like, at what point do they become creepy, I guess is a good way to say it. You know, so that, you know, a lot of robots that are designed, that we'll see shortly too, for the home are ones that are not trying to be particularly realistic looking, right? Like they don't look like people. it's enough to just have a thing like a gesture, you know, like sort of being able to look at you a little bit, or, you know, many of them don't even have full faces, because that would be too much, you know. So even just the hint of some sort of humanoid type reaction, as George is saying, you know, is enough for people to sort of project a personality onto that thing. So yeah, we do that, and I think it's like it's a sliding scale. Most of them will go more towards something that's like, you know, cute, or like you know, R2D2, something that you might know from the movies, you know, as opposed to some other cultures are more willing to accept something that looks more like an actual person, like Sophia. So the next thing we're not going to spend a lot of time on, but that is a very growing area of companionship in the sort of robot area is robot pets. So George, you want to talk a little bit about that? And there's a little video about that too.
Well, I think we'll play the video. Basically,
Yeah.
these pets are inanimate objects. At this level, in the beginning, they weren't even robotics, although they have been adding all kinds of sensors to it, to these pets. You know, there's reactions, quite strong reactions from some people against introducing these into seniors' homes in place of real pets. But real pets are not always possible. So let's play this video and you get some idea.
Wouldn't it be nice to bring joy, happiness, and comfort to your aging loved ones?
Yeah, you're a good girl.
With lifelike fur, authentic sounds, and realistic reactions that fill their hearts with love and laughter.
This is the kind of a dog to have.
I have a surprise for you. Oh, it's really something. It makes you feel happy.
Joy for all companion pets make joy, comfort, and companionship happen.
They make you feel that you're not alone. She makes you feel soothed. The purring is very comforting. He's got a smile that anybody would love.
Give the gift of joy and comfort with Joy for all companion pets.
So that's just one company. There are others that also produce it, but this is like another thing that during the pandemic, there were thousands and thousands of these robotic pets that were distributed to seniors' homes via various state departments of aging and different organizations that saw them as a way to help assuage loneliness and feelings of social isolation. So, you know, there are many, many more of these now in seniors' homes than there were a year ago. George, did you want to say? Yeah.
So these were taken, these comments were taken from 5 years ago, and definitely they may have softened and become more acceptable. And Judy pointed out that there are more recent comments that are more supportive of distributing these robots. But for some people, this becomes really a emotional react. They see this puppet being given to a senior who becomes attached to it, and they particularly in place of a live animal, become very reactionary against it. And so I just say, before you start thinking about getting one of these for your parents or something like that, you know, have a discussion with your family about it. Make sure that they're on board with this. The reply here was that pets take considerable care, and they may be a good option for anybody who, for whatever reason, cannot have pets. You know, some seniors are become aggressive, and a pet in their care is not a good safe for the pet. So, you know, giving them a artificial pet is probably a good compromise. But there is this last kind of comment. It's how sad, and they'll never replace dogs because dogs really love you.
So that gets us to more humanoid companions. This is LEQ. It's a product that is on the market. It's still kind of in its early phases. It's not available in Canada. It is available in the U.S. They've done a lot of testing. The company Intuition Robotics has done a lot of testing with seniors about how to improve this product. It's interesting because it's one that has a humanoid like sort of desktop feature like this. As you can see, it's inspired by, I don't know if you know that sort of desk lamp that jumps across the screen, and for Pixar's logo at the start of its animated movies. So it's inspired by that. It does turn its head. I'll show you a promo shortly, but it turns its head to react to people. One of the things that the company is very proud of, but there's other companies that are doing this as well, they're not the only ones, is that unlike the original voice assistants that we were just talking about before, LEQ and other products like it are also proactive, like they will actually initiate conversation. They're meant to get a sense over time of how much interaction the user wants with it. So when it needs to be quiet and when it needs to sort of speak up and sort of provide. A lot of times it's things like good morning, how are you, how'd you sleep last night, those kind of sort of basics of sort of starting a conversation. And with their beta users, they've found that that the product is something that the users become attached to and feel like there's somebody in the home with them. These are people who live alone primarily that they were testing it with, so that even if they do have family members who stop by on a regular basis and people who call them and all that, the LEQ actually fills a gap because they do live alone, so that there isn't somebody there 24 hours a day. This particular device is very much oriented towards seniors. That's the market that they're going after. So we can go on to the next slide.
Is this link to a video or not?
I think that this link is to no, it's that link is to their website.
Okay.
The link is for the video.
Okay.
On this slide, yeah.
So we'll play this video.
So we'll play this video, yeah.
How about a quick trivia question about sports?
Okay, go ahead, shoot.
How many home runs did Babe Ruth hit in 1927? Was it A, 51, B, 60, C, 74? What is your answer?
B, 60.
Well done.
And that broke his record, because in 1921 he hit 59. And that was only a little while after the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah.
So one thing I've noticed about that is he's talking to this device now. That device it's not taking what he's saying and adding it to its database of information about Babe Ruth, I don't think. So does it really care what he says? And yet he's very much involved with this device. And I think that's something to be aware of.
And the company is very much aware of that too. So if you look ever at the kind of things that they have to say about their own product, and they do a lot of talking about their own product. They do a lot of interviews with tech journalists and also general interest publications and senior oriented groups and things like that. But empathetic is how they would describe their device, that it's one that sort of listens and sort of learns, what it is that you as a particular user are interested in and how much interaction you'd like and at what times of day, when would you like to have a conversation most often. But they, did a lot of testing, especially again over the pandemic, and found that, people's interaction over time was actually increasing. So they weren't losing interest in talking to the device. Instead, they were getting sort of more interested. And a lot of people, sort of extrapolating from the pets idea, said similar things about having an LEQ in their home, that it felt like they had like a kind of low maintenance roommate, like somebody there, like an actual being that was there.
And they've done a good job of making this obviously not a person. The form is not humanoid, and the head is it's interactive with the person, but it's not going to be mistaken, I don't think, for a a humanoid device.
No, although as you said before, people are projecting, they've found this too, you know, they are projecting more capabilities onto it than it currently has. Like this guy even in the promo, you know, it is talking to LAQ beyond its capabilities, at least at present. I think there's some hope, you know, that down the line, you know, again, natural language processing is going to get to the point where, you know, more sophisticated conversations are going to be possible. But you know, people do still already, you know, kind of invest a lot more capabilities in these devices than they have.
Yeah, I would encourage. Go ahead.
I did show a different promo for this same device to the focus groups. I don't know if you recall, George. It was featuring a woman who was, you know, doing various sorts of things with the device. And one of the things that the developers have said is that they have kind of a series of personalities that they have developed for LEQ, and different people kind of end up kind of settling on a different one. So the one that I showed to the focus groups included nudging that kind of bordered on nagging. You know, basically was like, you know, you sure you don't want to practice that? Are you sure you don't want to, like, you know, do some exercise now? And some people in the focus groups reacted negatively to that. You know, they felt like that was definitely something that they didn't want. Is like, if you needed somebody to nag, you'd have, like, you know, your spouse or something like that. But some people actually do respond positively to that, according to the company. So, you know, that's another thing that's sort of different. Like right now it's fairly limited, but they're trying to develop different personalities that will be appealing to different people. And again, you know, that will mean that you're probably developing more trust and investing more in that particular device than you would if it wasn't something that you could relate to.
And these devices are designed largely for people who live alone.
Yeah.
Right. That is their and for healthcare organizations, this is a financial advantage.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that I think is a really important thing that's coming soon, and is definitely happening already. Again, because of the pandemic, people have gotten a lot more used to dealing with their healthcare providers remotely. You know, people have done doctor's visits, they've done consultations, and so one of the things that LEQ in particular, but like many other companies are trying to get in on, is a closer relationship between these devices and healthcare providers. Big questions for me remain about, like, how do you separate out, you know, the times when you're using it as a kind of conduit to your doctor or to your pharmacist or to sort of other people who provide medical care, and when you're using it just, you know, like an Alexa. And these things seem to be like kind of getting a bit blurry. So the companies are still trying to work that out, but for companies like Intuition Robotics, the prospect of teaming up with a company or a series of organizations that provide health care is like the holy grail. You know, it's basically a way that they can see sort of to financially make their products and their company sort of much more viable than they currently are. There are in that domain, like in that area of healthcare provision, there's a lot of applications that have been developed, especially in the last couple of years. It's a huge booming industry to create these kind of voice assistant oriented kinds of health connected devices and applications. So that's something that I think is just going to be constantly growing from now on out. The upside is that those specialized types of things have had to comply with specific health information protection legislation and regimes in both the US and Canada. So those aspects are much more conscious of their need to be careful about how they protect data, because health information is always considered to be sensitive data. So we'll see if there's a way, you know, for them to be able to use the sort of experience that they have with that aspect of the capabilities of these devices, and how that's then going to play out with regard to some of the other capabilities that they're also hoping to continue to allow. So George, so we do have that one, you know, so LEQ is a tabletop device, but there are some that actually are mobile. So George, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so, you know, we've had on the other and on this on the APCUG presentations about robotic devices, and one of the most common is the vacuum cleaner, which now has a mopping version, I understand. So that's kind of an interesting thing that people don't really think of as a device, because they're not interacting with it as a. It has intelligence in that it's able to map out a room and things like that. But then you move to more full-size devices that take on a humanoid form. So this is we're pretty comfortable with robots that do the cleaning for us, or water. I mean, the lawn watering is automated in most places now. So we're comfortable with that. The part that gets difficult is when the form factor becomes a humanoid. But also, I think the part that becomes the division in between these two is the area of simply the voice-assisted home devices like Google Home, and that's something that is halfway between has no form, but it definitely has the human interaction that we're familiar with.
So one of the devices on the previous slide is now here too, and so I showed a promo for Teami, which is this sort of, it's white here, it also comes in black, and so Teami was initially being marketed as a consumer product to sort of be a kind of mobile hub with Alexa enabled, and sort of with all of the sort of capabilities of the sort of video calling and integration with other Internet of Things, other smart devices and all of that. And now in the last year or so, they have teamed up with Medisana, which is a medical device company, to do things like, you know, as you see in the slide, you know, integrate with a blood pressure cuff, you know, or, you know, some sort of other kind of blood sugar monitor or something like that, so that it's actually got a more overt medical capability as well.
Should we play this video?
You can play the video, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sam. I live alone and I love it. Every day is full of surprises.
Do you need help? Should I dial emergency services?
No, I'm fine. Believe me, this thing wasn't my idea, but I've got to admit, it's growing on me. I'm in better touch with my family, especially my grandson. Talented kid. It reminds me to do stuff I'd prefer to forget.
It's time to check your weight. 180 pounds. Would you like to exercise today?
Breathe in to your legs. Very good.
Now I can even get a checkup without having to go to my doctor's office.
Pretty good, Sam.
Don't sound so surprised, Doc. I've even started cooking. I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks. And my kids really like that they can get in touch with me anytime.
Hi, Dad. What's up?
Just taking my meds, sweetheart. Like I said, I like living alone. But I'm open to other possibilities.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so this is a fairly new partnership between Teami and Medicana, it is I think a pre-order type situation, so it's still, again, not something that's like readily available, but it's something that they have brought to market. An interesting side point about Teami is that company actually has made its money on military robots. So they actually have a huge amount of money to in order to sort of run this kind of side business on consumer-oriented and healthcare-oriented robots where they don't have to make a lot of money on it, because they've already made, and they continue to make, a tremendous amount of money with their other robots. So that's a kind of interesting sort of just think about the economics of sort of robot kind of development. But Teami is still something that they're trying to market in a variety of ways, not just the healthcare robot. There's also, for retail, to sort of provide information to consumers coming into a shop or something like that. So there's a lot of different capabilities that they're imagining for these types of devices. And how the sort of seniors at home part of it fits in, and whether there are special concerns about that, is something that I'm particularly interested in with this research. So
we're running low on time.
We're running out of time, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but essentially we did summarize the concerns that seniors that we spoke to in this study raised about these devices. And again, this was now like almost 2 years ago that we were speaking to people prior to the pandemic.
It would be really interesting to see how they have changed.
If they've changed their views,
since COVID, and that people have been more used to using things like Zoom itself to communicate.
And if that affects, their willingness to accept this type of device into their
I'm sure it has changed their outcomes,
Yeah. But essentially, we also did come up with a bunch of recommendations for developers to think about, which I don't think have changed. I think seniors still, again, I don't want to overgeneralize. That's one of the things that we warned against in our study, that, there's a great variety of capabilities and great variety of interests and a great variety of tolerance level for different kinds of new learning and all that kind of thing. But in general, we wanted to remind developers that they need, if they're going to be creating devices specifically for the senior market, sometimes they seem to be marketing more towards the children of seniors than they are towards seniors directly. And, I think that's sometimes problematic, especially when you have, what you're imagining is a person who's perfectly capable of making these decisions for themselves. And empowering seniors to be able to make those kinds of decisions and to sort of know how to feel comfortable.
It's very hard for seniors to evaluate different companies, even though I think there is a difference between the companies. It's very hard for them to tell whether Google is better than Facebook. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, so I think we can just go to the last slides because we're at the end here.
So these are the takeaways,
Yeah, so this is just another, these are actually, we at Ontario Tech, we have all of these robots in our lab. We tend to try to get a hold of any robots that become available for purchase. We don't develop our own robots. We're just sort of developing ways of looking at the ones that other people are developing. But I think it's pretty clear that this is something that is coming. Especially as people get more and more comfortable with having devices that they can talk to in various parts of their lives. It's just a matter of time. So, my personal project is to try to sort of be there to keep reminding the developers and to get and giving seniors voices in making sure that their interests are protected. So I think that's what we.
So what I would add to that is, I would encourage people to start with a voice assistant, such as Google Home or the other manufacturers, because you get a good sense of where this can go, and also the limits of what you want to share with these devices. They're very helpful devices. I mean, I sort through electronic parts by reading out the part numbers, and then it gives me an audio description of the part, instead of me having to go on the website and type in the part number. It's great, but it's been an eye-opener to me as to how far these things will go. So try one out. I think that's and that, you know, for 40 or 50 bucks, you get a good sense of what's possible, and a lot of AI is applied to these voice activated devices.
So I'm gonna I'm gonna step out for Larry's presentation, but then I'll be back to answer some questions at the end of that.
Okay.
All right.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
We'll look forward to that. At this time, we'll change hats and bring on Larry Fortna, who many of you know. He's been with us a number of times on different topics that deal with technology. And today he's going to be sharing with us and I think demonstrating a 3D printer and how he no longer can live without it. And Larry's the president of the Lakes at Leesburg Computer and Technology Club. And unless Judy wants something to say first, we're ready for Larry.
Good to go for Larry.
If Larry's talking, you're muted.
All right, we'll start over. Maybe I'll just leave the screen up like this. I've been using 3D printers for maybe 7 or so years. I started out, I guess maybe in 2014, and I purchased my first 3D printer, which is this one here on the left, which was a out of the box, plug it in and start using it. And then that printer only lasted about a year. The parts had a part break on it, and you had to replace an entire assembly, which was expensive. And rather than invest more money in it, I went to a do-it-yourself 3D printer kit, which was about $200. That's the one here on the right. And I've been using that for the last 6 years, and I use it frequently.
Yeah, Larry, I think we better go to presentation mode because that's a little bit small for people to read.
Okay, let's switch this back this way. I didn't think it came in, and that's still too small, is it not?
That's correct.
Does this zoom in for you? No.
Nope.
Okay, well, it does not appear that that's going to get any bigger. I never noticed it doing this in the past.
Larry, what's under view? What's under view?
Yeah, would you go into slideshow view? You're just in like what?
I did go into the slideshow.
Well, then with PowerPoint, if you're in slideshow view, you don't see the thumbnails on the left-hand side.
Go to the first.
I went into that, but that did not help.
You see where view is? View over here on the extreme left.
Let's try this. And that's a little too much. Let me come back out here. Let's try going into, no, that doesn't work.
That last one was perfect.
This one's got to come down 1. There we go. We're going to have to do it this way. So as I first mentioned, this printer on the left is called an XYZ printer. That's the company name, XYZ Printing. That printer was about $500. And it was, you take it out of the box and it's ready to use. This one on the right is the one I've been using for the last 6 years. And it was a kit that I put together. I paid about $230 probably for it. And that's the one I've been using for the past 6 years. The advantage, of course, if you build it yourself, is you will end up knowing everything that there is to know about your printer. And you'll also be able to repair it very cheaply because all of the parts that go into the 3D printers individually are quite inexpensive. So this is another couple of views of my current printer. Up here at the top is a spool of filament, which is a plastic that is melted by an extruder down in this area here. And then that goes onto a heated bed, which is down in this area. On the right-hand side, I'm showing a Z-axis adjustment that I made for my 3D printer, which uses a 3mm screw and a nut on there to lock it down. And that activates a micro switch, which tells the unit when it's reached the surface of the bed. And I've mounted all of this on a MDF, 3/4 inch MDF sheet of wood, medium density fiberboard, actually is what they call it. So that keeps it stable so that I can move it from my shop into my house if I so desire. And I won't knock it out of alignment. So I highly recommend, if you're going to build one yourself, that be the first thing that you start out doing is get a sheet of MDF, because it's very stable, and you mount your printer to that, and then you can move it around. The first print level or layer that you make will determine the outcome of your project. So it's very important that that first level, first layer height be precise. And that is why I built this piece here, is so that I can adjust that with extreme sensitivity. Also, you probably need a few accessories. For instance, I use a sheet of 3000 grit sandpaper to smooth the bed down if I need to get some of the residue off of it. This piece here is a scraper that you can use to get under the completed project and take it off of the bed. And more importantly is this piece here, which was an X-Acto knife set that had a flat blade on it, which is very thin and allows me to get underneath the printed product to get it off of the bed, because they stick to the bed quite severely some cases. This was another one of those types of devices, but it's a little thicker. It does not work as well as this one. And tweezers I use to take some of the filament off of the nozzle that is just kind of dripping out of it at times. So originally this particular presentation was put together back in 2015. And this was a slide from that. And so how the 3D printers work, they do this by melting a plastic filament that is then deposited via a heated extruder, one layer at a time, onto a build platform. And it's does that with a 3D data that is supplied to the printer, and that data is called gcode. Each layer hardens, that is, as it is deposited, and it bonds to the previous layer. And the extruder and the bed are heated to temperatures based on the type of filament that you're using. And so this is kind of a visual of how a 3D printer works. It takes that material spool and that contains the filament, and it drops that down into an extrusion head, which is heated. And now that becomes molten material, and that goes down to the bed, the platform on the 3D printer, and it builds up an object one layer at a time. The layer thickness is about typically 0.03 millimeters in diameter. Although you can change the nozzle on the 3D printer to print different depths. And as I mentioned before, that first layer determines whether your print is going to be a success or a failure. Your heated bed must be exactly level, and it cannot be stressed enough. If your bed is not level, your print is not going to come out right. It could not stick to the bed, and it can be a real problem if the bed is not level. The Z-axis, so on a 3D printer, there are an X, Y, and a Z-axis. The X moves left and right, the Y moves forward and backwards from you, and the Z-axis moves up and down. And the bed itself is spring-loaded, so when it heats up, the height of the bed will change based on the bed temperature. So you want to get your bed temperature up to the operating temperature before you adjust the Z-axis height. And I typically do that with a sheet of paper, which is about 0.1 millimeter in thickness, and I slide that in the center of the print bed, and I adjust that Z-axis till it just touches the paper with the extruder, and you can move it around manually with the extruder along the X and Y axes with the motors disabled, and it should move the paper on all of the corners of the bed. So as I showed you before, I used a 3 millimeter fine threaded screw adjustment, which I added to my 3D printer. It didn't come with it. So I designed that to make it so that I could adjust it very precise.
Larry, do something for me. Somebody popped in and said if you click the view button under your 3 dots, then you can go to full screen and maybe we can see it really better.
The view button under
your 3 dots on the left-hand side.
Upper left of your screen, One more, there you go.
Okay, is that better?
It was supposed to be an option of full screen, but.
Right, let's see.
No, I don't have that on here. This is not.
Okay.
This
so
is Keynote.
Right, I looked it up. It must be slide only.
Okay, that's what he's got.
That's what I got right now.
That's good to go. Thanks.
Okay. 3D printers are typically very slow. There's a couple of folks here in my community that have bought 3D printers, and they were complaining that their prints take 8 hours or longer to print. And I explained to them that you can actually step up the speed on them. I run mine as fast as 7,200 millimeters per second when I'm doing larger objects, and it'll take me about 3 to 4 hours. If I'm doing a smaller project, some of those can be done in as little as 20 or 30 minutes. And the problem here with this view is I can't advance my slide. So I'm going to have to go to this, back to this one. So hardware wise, we use stepper motors that are used for the movement of the X, Y, and Z axis, plus a stepper motor for extruding the filament in what's called an extruder. And the heated bed ranges in temperatures from 50 degrees Celsius to about 110, depending on what material you're using. And the extruders, I usually run them between 190 and 225 degrees Celsius, again, depending on the types of material. And the types of material that I typically use are ABS and PLA. ABS is a much more difficult to use filament. It requires hotter temperatures. So I have to heat the bed hotter, and the filament has to be heated to a hotter temperature as well. PLA is a harder filament, and it works at a much cooler temperature, so I can actually run my bed at 50 degrees and my extruder at 190 when I'm doing PLA. And when I first started doing 3D printing, filament cost me about $15 to $18 per spool of 2 pounds. Now they're up in the $30 to $35 range. And I recommend keeping some spare parts on hand. The print nozzles will clog up, especially when you're switching from one color to another. The different filaments are slightly different in texture or content, and they can clog up your nozzle. I keep a supply of 0.04 millimeter nozzles on hand for doing most of my prints. But you can get them in different sizes and for different things that you might be wanting to print. I also keep spare extruder parts on hand just in case. Now, the print bed normally depends on where you get your printer. Some of them come with a sheet of aluminum under a heated surface, which is not as stable. So I recommend that you use a sheet of borosilicate glass, which gives you a very stable flat surface. And then add a sheet of what is called PEI on top of that. PEI is a material that allows you to print at a lower bed temperature, and it's not as critical for printing with ABS plastics, which does not like to stick to heated surfaces. You'll see on the forums people using hairspray and glue sticks, trying to get the ABS plastic to adhere to the heated surface. Whereas PEI adheres very well, but its biggest disadvantage is that it may be more difficult to get the product off of the heated bed when it cools down. And your first layer is even more critical. Your bed needs to be very level. If you get too close to the bed when you're on your first layer, you may not be able to remove the part, and it may destroy the PEI. So it's very important that you set that first layer height properly before you start printing. So this is what the heated bed looks like. It has an adjustment screw at the bottom, and it has a spring in here, which, as I mentioned, when the bed reaches different temperatures, that spring expands and contracts and changes the height of the bed. So you can adjust adjustment on each of the four corners to get your bed initially level when it's in its cooled position, and then when it expands, all four of them will expand at the same rate. And then typically this is like a sheet of aluminum here or a heated element. And then on top of that, we put the borosilicate glass plate. And then we add the PEI sheet to the top of that. It's got an adhesive backing on it and allows the material to stick to the glass. And it can also be removed if you damage your sheet of PEI. Stepper motors are what drive the X, Y, Z and extruders. They're very precise motors that advance in precise steps. And that's what they look like on when they're taken apart. The extruder is the part that heats up the plastic and pushes it out of a nozzle. And typically these range from 0.2 to a millimeter in diameter. Most of the ones I use are 0.4 millimeters in diameter. And I keep a supply of those on hand that I can quickly replace them. So there's a melting chamber in here and a support mechanism and an insulator. Sometimes there's a Teflon sleeve inside that the filament comes down before it reaches the heated element. So this is the melting chamber here. The heated element goes into this section here, and that's what heats up the plastic. Now, there are a lot of different filament types. The ones that I use are ABS and PLA, although I've also used some stuff called Ninja Flex, which is a rubberized material. I've made tires for a 3D printed race car, but it takes some real special handling for the Ninja Flex because it's like trying to push a wet noodle through that nozzle. I had to make some modifications to my extruder to be able to handle the Ninja Flex printed material. And I'm not going to be talking about the types of, there's other types of printers that are out there that are doing, they use resins instead of filaments. I won't be talking about those today, other than to mention that they do exist. Just going to be talking about the printer that I've been using. And then we need to talk about the software that is used to design the prints. Currently, well, I originally started out using SketchUp, and then later on I switched to Fusion 360, which is an Autodesk piece of software that is extremely powerful and capable. I've got the education version of it, so it's free to use for hobbyists. And I'll give you a demonstration of that as we get a little further down the presentation. And then you need a slicer that will take your 3D object that you've created and slice that into G-code that the machine needs. I originally started out with something called KISS Slicer and Slice 3R, which was another one. And then eventually I went on up to one called Simplify 3D, and I'm going to show you that one. It costs $150, but it's well worth it if you're going to get into 3D printing to have a good slicer. And this is extremely powerful. Repetier makes a controller board called a ramps 1.4 controller. I'll show you a picture of that here in a moment. That's what I use on mine. However, some of the 3D printers may have their own controllers that come with them. You don't need to design your own objects. You can download thousands and thousands of objects from a website called thingiverse.com. I will show you that in a moment. I have posted many of my own designs on Thingiverse, and it's a quick way to get something that you want to print and use it right out of the box and not make any changes to it. This is what a RAMPS 1.4 controller consists of. It is an Arduino Megas board along with a customized hat, they call them, that has sockets on it for the drivers for the extruders. So this contains up to 5 drivers. So you have one for X, one for Y, one for Z, one for your extruder, and a 5th one, which I don't use. And then, of course, these are the heat sinks that go on them, and then the USB connector. I also invested in what's called a space mouse. This is a 3D mouse that can move an object in all directions in the 3D space. And it's very handy when you're designing 3D objects. So I do have a video of a SketchUp file that I used to design something from scratch. And I'm going to show you that next. But I think I may just show you a little bit of it and then skip through it because I don't use SketchUp anymore. I found Fusion 360 to be much better. But anyhow, this is what the SketchUp interface looks like. And I'll just start the playback on that. And so it has a toolbox of selections over here on the left side. This is what's called an extrude tool, and it allows you to take a flat image and make it into a 3-dimensional image. And that's kind of one of the many tools that are available here. You can rotate it and do things like that. The slicer, this was an early slicer that I believe I used, which I've now gone to Simplify 3D, which is a little better, and I'll show you that in a moment. This was a screenshot I took of my XYZ printer, and I have the same thing pretty much on my home built unit, but it tells you what your temperatures are. And this was a video of me actually printing the object that I designed in SketchUp. Once you have your 3D object printed, there are some things you can do in post-production. If you print an ABS filament, it's capable of being smoothed with an acetone vapor bath. And the way I do that is I bought a 1-gallon paint can from Home Depot, clean one, no paint in it. And I drill some holes where the lid forms with the can. And I line the can with 3 layers of paper towel, secure it with magnets, and pour acetone into the rim so that it can soak into the paper towels. And then I bought a cheap round mirror that fits into the paint can and made a wire support for it so I could lift it in and out. And I put my 3D printed object on that mirror, lower it into the can, put the cover on it for 2 hours. And then when I take it out, it is completely smoothed out all of the rough edges, and it becomes a very smooth object. And you cannot do this with PLA. Acetone does not interact with PLA, so you can only do this with the ABS print. So at this point, I'm going to get out of here and take you into showing you the tools that I use. And I added this, that the fact that you should probably buy a set of digital calipers if you're going to be designing your own projects, and you can use that to do your measurements with. So with that, I'm going to change my screen sharing and get out here. And we're going to go over to the desktop. And we'll kick this out of the way and try to get some of this other stuff out of the way. I was looking around to see if I could find a 3D printer equivalent to what I bought. And I found this one that was on sale right now for another 3 hours or close to it. And you can buy it for $129. And this is at a website called iographic.com. And this is the website I mentioned before called Thingiverse. I go by the name Flash Solutions on here. And you can find all of the different things that I have designed and uploaded here. Just a partial list because I got a lot of things I don't publish. But there's 4 or 5 more pages of things that I have designed that I've published on Thingiverse. This is what's called PEI. This is that material I was telling you that you get to put on the heated bed that allows you to more easily print ABS material. And even PLA works much better with this. And so next I want to show you maybe Simplify 3D. So this is the $150 piece of software that I use for creating the what they call G-code that the printer uses to actually print the product. And you can move this around and put it in different positions. You can zoom in and out of it. These happen to be some gears that I was printing for a 3D printed race car. If you double click on one of these, you get a section over here that allows you to scale the parts, change the offsets on them, and change the rotation of the components and things like that. So it is possible to 3D print 2 different parts and then put the 2 parts together and then print them as one part using this particular software. So these are the different settings that it comes with. Again, my nozzle diameter I use is 0.4 millimeters. And so I'm going to go through each of these tabs, because if you do decide to get a 3D printer or make one yourself, you can take advantage of the settings that I'm using here. So I use my primary layer height of 0.3 millimeters. I usually use 3 top solid layers and 3 bottom solid layers, and I use 5 outline perimeter shells. And I use my first layer height at 100% and my first layer speed at 60%, for example. And you can do additional things with this, such as change to use a skirt or a brim, or to use a raft, or to use a prime pillar or an ooze shield. You can also change the infill. Because I'm printing a round object here, I'm using a concentric pattern. I could change that to rectangular, and I could change the infill pattern to different things. And you can change different angles for your angle offsets. You can add support. So if you have something that is going to start at the bottom, and as it goes up, it doesn't fit the base of the heated bed, you may have to use support material, which breaks off very easily. And then you have a temperature tab where you can set the temperature of your heated bed and the temperature of your extruder. And then you have a cooling fan, and you can change the parameters of that. And the G-code section allows you to set up the size of your print, your 3D printer. Mine is 200 by 200 by 200 millimeters. And then there's a script section where you can change the start and stop scripts that allow you to turn the motors off when you finish, or to position all 3 of your axes before you start. And here is where you would set your default printing speeds. And some additional parameters here, and then some advanced parameters where you can actually print multiple layers. You could say start printing at 0 millimeters and stop at 3 millimeters. And then maybe you want to change filaments to a different color. And then you would have another process where you would start at 3 millimeters and go up to the rest of the height. So like over here, I have 1 layer. I could add another layer in here in which I started at 3 millimeters, for example, and I stop printing when it gets to 20 millimeters, for example. And so I could change different processes, different elements within this process. And then when I go to print them, I could merge them all together as one process. And do something like that. So here we have a breakdown of what it looks like layer by layer. So here this is my infill, which is a wiggle pattern. I just changed that. Earlier I had it set to concentric but you can move this slider here and see layer by layer how your 3D print is going to be printed and what it looks like when it completes. This little section out here, I lay down a section to get the extruder to start extruding plastic before it actually gets to the object that's going to print. So this is called Simplify 3D. This particular piece of software is called Fusion 360. This is a project that I designed to dispense dominoes. I designed this from scratch. And I made this part here to use a safety pin. There'll be a screw that goes up through these holes, and these holes here accept the bent elements of a safety pin that gives it the spring tension, so that when I press on the back side of that, it pushes the domino out through the opening, and I have dominoes stacked inside of here. I'm using my 3D space mouse to move the object around. The space mouse was, I think, about $137. And it only works with certain tools like Fusion 360. Let's see if we could go over to, no, let's go over to here. Fusion 360 lets you set up all sorts of different project areas. So this was, these were some projects I made to hold the remotes for my TV. So, you know, I have a lot of different remotes, and I designed this to hold the different remotes, and I've got several different versions of those over here that I've created to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do with it. And let me go back for a moment here to my presentation. Maybe. So I think that was the last slide. I wasn't quite sure how long it would take to do this presentation, because I left some parts out so I would have plenty of time. This is my email address, larryfortna@gmail.com. If you have any questions about your 3D printer, would like some assistance with getting one set up, I'd be more than happy to help you. I've assisted a few other folks here in the park where I live to get them up and running with their 3D printers. I find the 3D printer is extremely invaluable. To give you an example, I don't know if I can get the camera to show this. This is a water bottle holder. So I have a Zephyr Hills water bottle, and inside, if I can show you that, it's got ribs in it that hold the water bottle, so that when I need to take the cap off of it, the bottle does not turn. And I have printed quite a number of these. This one if you look closely at it, you will probably see there's ridges in it. This was printed in PLA, and so you can feel the ridges that are in it. I have printed quite a few of these in ABS plastic, and then put them in my paint bucket and put them in an acetone vapor for 2 hours, and they come out completely smooth. And it actually increases the shine of the plastic, so they come out looking gorgeous. But ABS plastic is a lot harder to deal with. So I find my 3D printer invaluable. I use it all the time for doing different things. This particular object is an iPhone holder. So I set my iPhone in that. I fly a 3D a drone, and this white piece that you see on here was an adapter that I made to hold my iPad mini, so that I can fly my drone with that. So again, I use my 3D printer very frequently. It's probably gets used at least once a month, if not more often. And I find that actually the development of something you want to print is probably even more fun than doing the 3D printer. Actually doing designs in Fusion 360 is really quite fun to do. I did kind of want to show you real quick just how easy it is to do something. For instance, you can create a sketch, and we can select a angle for it here. I'm just going to create a rectangle, for example.
You want to share your screen again?
I'm not sharing my screen. Oh, that's right, I'm not. I can't see what I'm doing, so let me get back over here and go back to share desktop. So again, I went in here, I did create a sketch, just like so. Created a rectangle, and then I can select that rectangle and press E, which is the extrude key on my keyboard, and I can extrude that up into a 3D object. And once it's extruded, and let me say, okay, I'll create a new body out of that. Once it's extruded, I can select a face. Alexa, stop. So you can change it dynamically. Do a cut like that. Or maybe I wanted to create a sketch. And well, I want to create a sketch now. I could use this particular body here to cut a hole in this body, for example. So that's some of the power that you have available in Fusion 360. So I think that's really all I needed to show you here. And I'll turn it back over to you, John.
Okay, and then I just kind of volley it back over to Judy to
Mhm.
start questions before we open things up.
Okay, one of the questions is, how much do the nozzles cost? Not only do you have to buy a replacement filament, you also have to buy nozzles.
Yeah, nozzles are quite inexpensive. Let me pull them up here. I won't show it to you. I'll just bring it up. I'll go to Amazon.com and we'll go over to my orders and we'll search for nozzle. So I bought 20 nozzles for $10.
Oh, very good.
So most of the parts, the replacement parts, are fairly inexpensive.
Cool. And I do have to say, my oldest grandson learned about 3D printers 9 years ago when he was in his high school robotics club and ended up being the president of the team. And they used them to make their mock-up. And I have my son's 1994 Toyota pickup in the driveway, and the knobs for the rolling up and down of windows, you remember that time, day and time, they were missing. So Tyler just said, no problem, Grammy, I will make you some. And they're bright blue, which, you know, brightens up the interior. One of the groups north of San Diego, huge retirement community, they stopped having their meetings and they had a 3D printer that people could use. They bought 2 more. They exclusively meet socially now, and anybody in the retirement community that needs something, they whip it up with their 3D printers now, and they are absolutely having the greatest time with that. And it started out with this lady who had a 1,000-year-old refrigerator. Something broke, no replacement parts, and that started them on the road of helping the residents in their community. And I thought that was way cool.
What an excellent idea. I am going to do that.
Okay.
I never thought of doing that. That is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the last meetings they had was Bob G giving his security presentation. They had over 100 people there. They said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to give back. Way cool. Is there free open source software for 3D design, slicing, etc.?
Yes, there is. There's quite a number of free sources out there. Thingiverse has that is a website that you can get free objects that people have designed, and it covers a huge range of. I spent, then this was 5 years ago, I spent 5 hours scrolling through all of the different things that were in Thingiverse. That was 5 years ago. So there's just literally tons and tons of free objects that you don't need to design it. You just download it and throw it in your 3D printer and print it. There's also some free tools like Kiss Slicer, I believe, is probably free. I haven't checked lately. So there are Repetier Host is free. The only one that I've had to buy was Simplify 3D. I didn't really have to buy that, but I chose to buy it because it gave me a lot more options, better options than I had with the stuff that you could get for free. And I've gotten my money's worth out of it.
Larry, when you send your presentation to me, would you also include the URLs for some of the things that you're talking about?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. What protection do you use when working with acetone, such as a respirator, mask, goggles, gloves, or other personal protective equipment? And how do you ventilate the area? And I did forget to say, my grandson just prints all night long. I don't know whether he could sleep without his 3D printer going.
I don't do it in the house. I have an attached shop, and I open both doors, and I don't do any particular ventilation except I could turn on a fan if I wanted. But I'm not exposed to the acetone, but for the amount of time it takes me to pour it into the can. And then I put the cover on it, and it sits there for 2 hours. And then after the 2 hours, I pop the top, take it out of the can, put the top back on it, and I leave the shop and let it sit there for another hour or two for it to harden back up. So I'm not really exposed to the acetone for any length of time. But you could use rubber gloves. You'd have to use a type of rubber glove that is not does not react to acetone, because it's a very strong chemical.
Do you wear gloves when you're working with your 3D printer and all that stuff that you just talked about?
No.
Okay. How many pounds of material did it take to create the water bottle holder? Or how many holders can be created with a spool of 2 pounds of material?
Good question. I could probably get maybe 4 or 5 water bottle holders out of a 2-pound spool. I'm not really sure. I have a huge, like a bookshelf full of different filaments, every different color, both ABS and PLA. Most of it I bought back when it was $18 a spool. And now when I run out of a color, I find that, the price is going up. It's not uncommon to spend $30 to $40 for a spool of plastic now. But it goes a long, long way, especially if you're printing smaller things. It goes for quite a long time. You can get a lot of things printed with one spool.
And I'll interject here. Tyler uses his 3D printer for all his gaming pieces. He makes them for everybody that gets together to play the games. Let's see.
I do that as well. In fact, we play Mexican Train over at the clubhouse, and I printed some the little Mexican trains that you put on top of the dominoes. I did that just about a week ago. And in fact, I printed card holders for cards. I print a rotary card holder that's on ball bearings to put in the center of the table. You're just limited by your imagination. That's what you can do with one of these 3D printers. It's if you can think of it and it'll fit on a 8-inch platform, you can make it. It's that simple.
Please discuss 3D printing with metal or glass.
With what?
Metal or glass.
I have not done anything with metal or glass. That would take a different type of printer than I have. There are some filaments that have, they are called metal. They're not really metal, but they're probably some form of metal in some sort of a filament embedded in it. I've never used that type of a filament. So I've really not used that. ABS and most everything I do now is PLA because it's so easy to work with. I have done Ninja Flex, which is a rubbery material. I made several things with that, but those are the only materials that I've worked with.
Okay. You listed a lot of accessories. For a beginner, what would you recommend?
Sometimes, the 3D printers, if you buy the off-the-shelf already put together and you're not building it yourself from scratch, they may have some of those tools already included. Basically, the biggest tool, the thing I use the most is a X-Acto blade, which is maybe a 1/2 inch wide. It is extremely thin, and I need to use that to get under the printed part to break it off of the bed. I've got a small hammer that sometimes I use to tap on the 3D printed part to help break it free. But other than that, I 3D printed another part, which is has a razor blade in it that is spring loaded, has a spring in it, and you put the filament in the this thing and push down on it, and it puts a 45-degree cut in the filament, so it makes it easier to slip into the extruder. All of those things you can find on Thingiverse and print your own tools. I've reprinted several of the parts that make up my 3D printer. Some of them have worn out. You'll notice on my 3D printer there are 2 rods that have the support pieces that move up and down. Those are 3D printed parts, and I had one start wearing out. I could see that it was going to break, and before it broke, I took the time to take it apart, measure it, and design a replacement part in Fusion 360, and put it all back together and printed that part before the other part completely gave out. And so a good deal of the components that are on my 3D printer have been reprinted and replaced, because I have gotten 6 years or so worth of use out of it, and some of the parts do wear out.
Tom O, I just want you to know that when you put that comment in the chat box, I already had translated it in my head, what you really meant. Let me have a couple of questions here for George and or Andrea. Whichever. Your presentation sounded really great, had a lot of information, but as a senior on a fixed income, are things ever going to get more affordable?
I can answer that, because that question comes up every time, like, no doubt. Like, the question about cost is a really pressing one for seniors, like pretty almost universally, I'd say. And the devices vary in cost. So if you were just to out of pocket, like wanna buy one of those Teami type robots, the medical robot at the end, the most advanced that was mobile, that's going to cost you about $4,000 US, right? It's an expensive device. But and LEQ is a bit less, although I just looked it up and it was more expensive than I remember it being last time I looked at it. It was still more, it was like somewhere around 3,000, which I think when I first looked at it, they were trying to aim for a sort of $1,500 kind of range. So it's more like, if you're going to buy a fancy smart TV or something like that, it's sort of like that. The sort of tablet, Google Home, like those things are obviously a whole lot less expensive. But I think what we're seeing is that they're trying to come up with a business relationship with these medical service providers, or healthcare providers of different sorts, partly to see if they can't convince insurers, for instance, that it is a medical device that they will at least in part subsidize. So I mean, I mentioned that there are programs where some of the companies are trying to give away these products to kind of get people used to the idea of having them, again, like through senior serving organizations and stuff like that. But I think the aim is, to sort of come up with a model that's more affordable, because otherwise it's not going to work. The other thing that people often mention as being a concern is most likely these are going to be in some way a subscription type service. It's not like you just buy something once and then that's the end of it, especially if it's going to be more a sort of walled garden type approach, where it's like protected from the big wide internet, where you just kind of get free services because you trade away your data. But all of that is still under development. But I think it is a really big concern. That at the moment it is definitely not accessible as a technology for most seniors. But like I said, they're really working towards finding ways of making it something that might end up at least in more people's homes, if not, certainly not universal.
And the little cats and dogs are $109.
Yeah, so those are much more accessible.
Yeah, and I would add that you get a lot of functionality out of the voice assistant and tablet versions of things. And I can see that services that are more evocative, or I don't know what the right word is, where the application takes an initiative, will be offered as well. And those will be consumer priced at $100 or so.
Mm-hmm. Can you ask LEQ to turn itself off, or erase or ignore a rude question, or do they just record everything they hear?
So what gets recorded and what doesn't get recorded, I think record is also maybe not the right word technically. Right now, LEQ is operating on a proprietary platform run by Intuition Robotics. So, and they use it supposedly, at least, only to inform the machine learning process, right? Like, so they're not meant to, at least, keep that recording, as a record of your conversation per se. It's meant to sort of be added into the machine learning database, sort of de-identified with you, and then LEQ gets to learn how to better speak. But I do think that all of these devices are aware that people want something like a wake word, or something that would allow you to say, go to sleep, Ellie, or something like that, so that it's not always on. On the other hand, there are some features of it that means it has to be at least sleeping and not totally off, and has to be able to respond. For instance, if you're using some of these devices, not necessarily the ones that I showed you, are meant to detect if there's some sort of abnormal activity, if you fall, or you don't get out of bed, or you haven't interacted with the voice assistant in a certain amount of time, that it will send an alert to somebody that you've designated, or a healthcare provider or something. So it has to be awake that much, at least. So I think those are all not technologically insurmountable, but they are some challenges that the developers are working on.
Cool, thank you. Let's open it up for live Q&A now.
I saw that on your chat forum, somebody asked about Ph.D. filaments. And the Ph.D. filaments start around 230 degrees to 250 degrees centigrade. So I don't think that my printer would go that hot. I can get up to about maybe 220, 226. But I can't get up to 250 degrees to handle that type of filament.
I asked the question, and the research that I had done indicated that PET-G was a little less demanding than ABS. So if you could do ABS, I sort of implied you could do PET-G, and it looked like a more useful general purpose filament. Some of the benefits of PLA without the odors and whatnot that come from ABS.
And as a reminder, if you would...
If you'd like to ask a question, don't forget to use the reactions button, raise your hand. Go ahead, John.
We think alike. So I was going to say that. Yeah. But hosts or presenters, if you have something to say, you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, myself, I don't really like using the hotter temperatures. I typically find them so difficult to work with that I try to stick with PLA if possible. I know some folks print nylon and some other fancy filaments and types of material, but it does require hotter heat, and I just tend to try to avoid it if possible because it's so much easier with PLA.
Hey, John.
Yeah, I was going to ask Larry, it kind of took me back when you said that the first printer that you bought for some good amount of money only lasted you a year. Was that expected or unexpected, or?
I did not expect it, but as it turned out, I mean, you can still buy those printers. You can even buy them used, but I had one component break on it, part of the extruder, and it was probably a 59-cent part, but you couldn't just buy that part. You had to buy an assembly, which ended up being up around $100. And I just didn't think that, I really didn't like the construction of it as well. So I decided rather than put that kind of money into fixing that unit, that I would build my own, or I can buy the parts a whole lot cheaper. Most of the components on the 3D printer that I built myself, they're in the no more than $20 or $30 for about anything that's on there. You can replace a motor for $15, $20. The parts are just cheaper when you do it.
Well, you got your money's worth, if you've been using that one, the one you built for 6 years.
Oh yes, for sure. And I only paid $220 or so for it.
Tom, your question, please. Don't forget to unmute.
It wasn't a question, it was a clarification. Somebody asked about printing metals and glass, and that's a different kind of a process. This goes back to the early days when they talked about rapid prototyping, RTP. And what they did then was they took a material and they would, like metal, they would take the powdered metal and they would put it into onto a plate, and then they would use a laser to fuse that layer and then move it up and fuse another layer. And so it was layer by layer fusion of the metal or the glass material using a laser. And the other way that is done now is if you have a UV curable resin. I don't remember which company is selling them right now, but what they do is you start off with the platen just below the surface of the resin, and you expose it to a UV light, and that becomes your layer. Then you drop that and it fills in with more resin and UV cured. It's like the stuff your dentist uses when he puts a filling in your tooth and he uses the UV gun to cure the material. So there's 3 or 4 different ways of doing 3D printing. I don't think anybody has a laser in their garage doing fusing of metals. I think that winds up being something like Stratasys in Minneapolis that can set up a printer like that. So any other questions? I've got lots of information about that.
Frank, your question.
Thank you, Judy. First of all, Larry, thank you for your presentation. We're planning in Leisure World of installing a 3D printer for the use of our members this year. And you've been kind enough to share your email address, and I've been taking notes and have kind of a bill of materials here of everything we'd have to buy to set that up. I have the costs and as I've been able to note them, but if you don't mind, I will send you an email to see if I've missed anything and make sure that I know what we should be budgeting for that.
Certainly. I'd be
Thanks,
happy to help you with that.
Larry. The presentation was just so informative. Andrea, my question for you was relating to your research. It's so interesting, and we in the Leisure World Computer and Technology Club are planning on doing some things in our, we used to call it the computer lab, where we had 10 or 12 PCs that people that didn't have a computer could come in and use it. We're reimagining that now into a tech center where people can come and experience technology they don't currently own. And so we're imagining putting in place in our former lab and now our tech center, things like virtual reality, 3D printing, those various kinds of technologies that are out there, but most of our residents don't currently own. Your research, I think, would be really relevant for us to be aware of in terms of the various technologies that seniors should be getting exposed to. I was wondering if your research is available, published online, or how we might get access to that.
Andrea, I will be sending you an email asking you just that, because I've been asked for the link to any papers or anything you have online as a result of all the stuff that you've been working on, okay? Or you've got my email address, you can just send that to me.
Absolutely, and it's ongoing, so I'm still doing variations on this. I mean, part of the presentation I talked about that there's been a big impact on how people think about using technology for social support as a result of the pandemic. But I think, so I've done some research, even though I was here in my basement the whole time. You know, I've been doing Zoom feedback groups. I've been doing online surveys. I've been trying to continue to get people's thoughts, including some harder to reach people. So I absolutely, I can give you what I have, and I can keep in touch about things as they roll out. I also should say that is another context that I think is very interesting and offers different opportunities. Like the things that I've been looking at so far are products that are aimed towards people who are living on their own in their own homes, especially those that live alone, because that's the most sort of evocative situation where somebody might use one of these devices as a companion. But I think senior residence communities have different resources and a different way of thinking, like your group at Leisure World sounds like they're doing, you know, where you could pool your resources and have more things that people could share. But then also you have the opportunity to set it up differently, right? And depending on the level of care, you know, if it's just, you know, anybody who just lives there independently, they have their own apartments, there's that. But there's also some products that are aiming for the long-term care home kind of context, where it would more be the institution or the organization that would be in charge of the technology, and so it would relieve the individual senior user from having to, understand it or make choices about it. So there's a lot of different things going on, but I think that's a great idea to have a room like that exposes people to different technologies, and I think it would be wonderful if a part of that was thinking about what are the issues that these technologies raise. What would you like to see in place that would be a way for you to feel more comfortable using this. I would be happy to talk to you about that more myself. I think that's a great way of approaching the future.
And if you ever need more people to be in a focus group, let me know.
I will.
And we'll round them up.
I'm excited about this connection because I think, like I said, there's a big range. There's people who don't know much about technology and are sort of put off by it, and then there's people like all of you, who are, many of whom are probably experts in a variety of things and very capable and willing and excited about new things. So yeah, I'll be in touch for sure.
And I have a question for Frank. Would you please put a short article together about what you're doing with your lab so I can include it in the summer reports news magazine?
I would be happy to, yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And again, you've got my email address.
Yes.
Over to David.
Well, good morning. This is a question, or basically a couple comments for Larry. Last summer I went and got myself one of the Ender 3 V2s, and that was about $260, $280, and it comes as a kit so that you can build it, you can assemble it yourself, but it's a very well put together thing. And then at Christmas time, I got a little thing which is called a BL Touch, which is used to automatically level the bed or to adjust that. And when I did that, I had to update my firmware to get a new version of the Marlin firmware. Have you, for your put together one, what version of, what firmware do you use to run inside your put together one that comes on the little Arduino board?
I use Repetier Host. I use the Repetier software. I had CNC machines where I've used Marlin, but Marlin I didn't feel was suited for what I wanted. So I'm using Repetier Host.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to mention is when I do my slicer, I've been using the Cura, which is free. I'm like up at version 4.8 now, works very well for me. And then also when I'm just doing some simple designs, I've been using the OpenSCAD, which is much easier to get into. It's not quite as big of a learning curve as Fusion 360. And I thought Fusion 360 was no longer sort of freely available, that you had to buy a license for that. Is that true?
Yeah, I've been using Fusion 360 for several years. I noticed when I open it, it says I have an education license, which I really use it as a hobbyist. I don't know what their restrictions are, but when I got into it, they didn't balk at it. So I've been using it for a number of years, and there are many tutorials out on the internet on how to do different things with it. And it's quite easy to use for simple stuff.
Yeah, I think that changed last year, and not all of us have, can get education licenses if we're not associated with some sort of a school or a university.
David, would you please put the name and URL of that program that you said is easier into the chat box, please?
Sure, I can do that.
I'll share that with everybody. Jimmy, your question. And please remember, both of our AI people are from Canada.
Yes. So my question is that in our car industry in the USA, 10 years, we're supposed to keep parts available, manufacturers, 15 years for safety items like airbags and stuff like that. And I was just wondering if there's anything coming down the line for the wireless Internet of Things. Is there anything that you know of that, legislates that we either have maybe a USB adapter jack or something, so that we in my house we have the Google Minis, and some of them don't have the 5 gigahertz frequency, and these things become so obsolete so fast, and it's a safety issue, I think.
I think it's a good point. Google brings products in and then takes them out. We all remember Picasso was such a great photo editor, and it disappeared essentially. So that is a concern. Sony had a product, Abo, which they were going to take off the market. It was a dog, a very interactive dog, and people got really upset when they were going to take it off the market, and they brought it back onto the market. But I'm not aware of any requirement that any product be kept going, and for that reason, I would, not invest heavily in a particular product. And my concern, of course, is when people become attached to these devices, the loss of the device becomes quite a loss. It's a big loss to them. Andrea, I don't know if you've got a comment.
I agree. I think that at the moment, the devices are pretty much thought of along the lines of software rather than hardware like a car. So it's not, there's no obligation to keep something functioning in the way that there is with many other sort of more material kinds of goods, because I think that it is a constantly evolving landscape technologically. So I think we'll see, problems. The robotics market is not, it's not like, other than the voice assistants, it's not like the actual hardware of the robots has taken off. It's still been a very slow, mostly companies develop something, they do a lot, they get a lot of hype out of the tech press, and a lot of people are interested. They even get a lot of investors, but it doesn't go up into the sort of acceptance range where it becomes something much more common. And partly it's because it is expensive, and people do think, like, what's going to happen? Like, if I buy this $4,000 robot, am I guaranteed that it's going to work in 3 years, right? Like, so I think those are big questions, and there isn't anything requiring them to keep it functioning. I mean, I have lots of basically defunct, very cute looking, expensive toys in my lab that were purchased and they're not supported. The businesses go bankrupt or whatever, and then that's the end of it, right? Like, there's no, unless you're personally going to tinker with it, there's no support anymore. So I think those are good questions.
I would say, the big company that isn't going to go bankrupt is worth looking at as a supplier. But even big companies change products, and but that's another reason. Like I say, if you don't invest too much, you can, get the newer version, and it won't be devastating.
So I'm not going to get parts from my Furby?
They brought Furby back after Furby was gone for like a decade, and Furby resurfaced, so you never know. I hate
it was always
I'm just going to go on record saying Furby drove me crazy. I have a daughter, and she had one. I used to actually routinely lock it in a closet.
Oh God. It always used to be a lot of fun attending Comdex back in the day and CES, to the Emerging Technology Pavilion. And you'd go and you'd say, oh, that is just absolutely fantastic. And the majority of them never got funding to go any further, which was really unfortunate. I remember the refrigerator that, that when you got out of the shower, you stepped on something, and a scale probably, and it told the refrigerator whether you had gained or lost weight. If you had gained weight, by the time you got to the refrigerator, it said perhaps you should have a salad or something like that. And that never went anyplace, but I just thought that was way cool. Over to Bill James.
Larry, this is a question for you. The drivers for the 3D printers, is that in the operating system of the computer or in the software?
It's in the firmware. Firmware on the.
So when I get ready, so when I select to print something, where would I find the printer? Would it be just like I find my regular printer, or is it? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, in my case, the 3D printer plugs into a USB port on my laptop, and so I load the G-code into the Repetier host software, which sends the commands to the Repetier host hardware that in turn sends it to the components that do the actual work. So the Repetier host hardware is firmware that has its own programming in it that tells the stepper motors, how far to go to make 1 inch, for example. So you set all of those parameters up in that firmware. But the G code that resides on your laptop or whatever computer you're using to drive the 3D printer.
Okay.
So it's just recognized as, Control P print, so to speak.
No.
Well, no.
That was my question.
That was his question. Okay.
That was my question. Yeah.
There's a whole language. G code is a you can look it up, but there's like a M600 means change the filament, and it does several actions. You can type that into a text box and say execute this G code, and it will move the extruder to a different position on the bed. It will eject the filament. It will wait for you to insert a new filament. And then
those are the profiles that you put in, though. Those are the profiles you put into Repetier. Okay, that's not the firmware.
Okay, over to Bill to ask to talk about Herman and
I wasn't. I had
dog.
No, I had a question for Andrea also, and this is kind of something I just remembered. If you remember, there was a movie.
Power here. I need to interrupt. I've just lost. Well, no, it just came back. We lost our power. I thought that.
You must have Spectrum.
Thanks, Larry.
APS backup.
Storms.
Andrea, I just had a question about something that I just brought to mind. If you remember, there was a movie that was called AI about the robotic boy, and it started out to be rather on the bright side, and then it turned dark. Do you think that has any bearing on how people accept human-like robots?
Absolutely. I think, in fact, with many things, but robots in particular, I think science fiction informs how people think about the future all the time. And they think about robots in two different tracks. There's the cute, very loyal, maybe even better than a human companion type supporter, right? Like that would be your sort of Star Wars droids, and you know, Baymax, and there's a whole bunch of Wall-E. I mean, there's a lot of examples of robots that are sort of on the positive end of the scale, and then there's the destructive, you know, authoritarian ones that are trying to take over the world and replace, you know, enslave humans and all of that sort of thing. So I think people, you know, could go either way. There's the utopian and the dystopian. I think there was a movie just a few years ago with Frank Langella called Robot and Frank, I think it was called. And it was about a senior citizen who's got a robot companion. And it's a comedy. You know, he basically, you know, develops, he's resistant at first, but he develops this very positive interaction with this robot over time, enough so that he like kind of gets into capers with him and, you know, all that kind of thing. But I think, you know, the way that we imagine the future, you know, is always influenced by not just science and what's, you know, actually possible, but by what, you know, what we put in our imagination about, you know, what's going to happen down the road. So that, you know, I think that's always the case.
And Bill has a couple of other things.
Can I just answer that point? I think we've learned from social media that when it started, it was going to be, you know, the self-publishing, the great solution for so many of the world's problems. And we've learned that social media has its downsides, and it's got to be watched.
Well, I think, you know, in my case, as Judy was alluding to, is that I live alone and I'm a senior, and I want to live, you know, as much as I can, as long as I can in my house. So I'm buying things that are robotic in nature that will do tasks for me. And I'm very comfortable with doing that. But I've talked to some of my individuals out of my computer club that are not comfortable with that. And I guess another question would be, how do we make people feel safe and secure using those types of items, such as, you know, the assistants and the robotic vacuum cleaners and all these things that are tied to the internet, and that has its own kind of issues, because people get really suspicious when things are connected to the internet. They feel like they're being spied upon or data is being taken from them. So how do we learn, or how can we try to convince people that there is a more of a positive side to this than there is a negative?
That is the $1 million question that I'm sure like all of these companies would really like to know the answer to. And I think some of it has to do with, I mean, you saw even with the Facebook portal, I mean, they're like helping to sort of recognize that there are these concerns and addressing them, I think is one thing that's an important development. That's not, like, 'cause I've been studying these now for several years, and many of the companies don't bother to address these types of concerns. They're all about, oh, this is great, it's wonderful, it can do all these things, and they don't really acknowledge that people have some reservations about the technology and some concerns about it. So I think acknowledging, educating, and designing to address those concerns, I think will help. And then also, I think it's really important to get seniors that education, you know, so that they have an opportunity to learn about, you know, the ways that they can protect themselves, the way they can make choices between different products, or, you know, influence the way that the policy goes, or the way that the designs go in the future. So I think those are all things that have to happen in order for people to become, it can't just be, you know, reassurance that things are perfectly fine to use if they are genuinely concerned about it.
I think we have many examples in the COVID vaccination discussion, and lots of good instruction about how to join in discussions and you know, be receptive to the concerns of people who are not getting vaccinated in your yeah.
Bob G, over to you.
from a security standpoint, most AI products are consumer oriented, not security oriented, and it requires intervention from a security minded company to protect those devices from misbehaving.
And
there are already companies, and I happen to be part of, not working for, but part of a company that does exactly that. Their Omni product is specifically designed to help protect
So that's
and
vast.
make sure that Internet of Things devices do what they're supposed to do. And if something happens and they wind up being intercepted and start doing things they shouldn't or start misbehaving, that they get shut off before they can cause damage.
And that company name is Avast.
It's Avast, and their product that's designed for this is called Omni, O-M-N-I.
And if you have not had his 2021 security presentation, you should. I'll be targeting a whole bunch of people in October for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, because if you tie his security presentation into that, you might get some guests and some publicity in your local newspapers and all that good kind of stuff. You have my email address. Please feel free to proactive and I'll put you on the list. I probably already got 6 groups that have got him on there. And one of the questions is Bob G paid to do what he does? No, he's a volunteer just like all of us. Okay. And he is on their forum and has answered 16,000 million questions, so to speak.
45,000.
Well, thank you. I used to be 30,000. Good job for the update. Okay. 45. I'll change my spiel on that. Are there any more questions? I will be sending questions in the chat box to our presenters, and it'll come out to you as the Q&A as usual. I think this was an absolutely fantastic, wonderful learning process. You know, George sent me a list of presentations and says, gee, I can do any of these. And I thought, Robots for Seniors works for me. And I knew Larry was working on the 3D printer one. And I thought, in my mind, that kind of goes together. Okay, they're both hardware, so to speak. But I think this was a good duo. Look for the email that you will receive. Yes, next week on the presentations that we will be offering at our 3 Wednesday workshops in July. Don't forget, if you'd like to participate by presenting something that you dearly love, it sounds like a lot of you have a lot of knowledge about a whole bunch of stuff. And if you are comfortable giving presentations to your group, this is just a larger group in various and sundry states, plus Canada. So think about volunteering. You don't, like today, Andrea and George, they switched back and forth. You don't have to do everything by yourself. You can get a buddy to work along with you. And I'm sure that all 3 of our presenters would nod their heads when I'd say, it's really fun to do this. Nod, people, okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Andrea, for participating.
Yes, it is.
So thank you so very much for attending, and a huge thank you to our presenters. Over to you, John.
Okay, and I'd like to always thank Bill for being co-host and Judy for taking care of all the questions to get those all together. Thank you for coming. We're going to do this again next month. I want everybody to have a safe and enjoyable 4th of July. My goodness, tomorrow's July. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks with some excellent workshops. And we're trying to start putting together August. So give us some ideas.